This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Hey, I'm Greer. Together with my husband, we have 2 boys and 2 dogs and raising a child with additional needs. Our day-to-day experience isn't being talked about in everyday life, and I see a gap in those leading people who are neurodivergent. Whether you're a parent, a friend, a teacher, or a neighbor, we can all journey together to better understand the neurodiverse world. Everyone is welcome to take part in the conversations we will have over a cup of tea or coffee as we share the joys, struggles, and differences in being neurodivergent or raising a child who is. We're so glad you're here. Today's conversation is with Melissa. She shares her journey of being diagnosed as an adult with autism and how TikTok and Instagram helped her to pursue that diagnosis. She has worked with families across the US and the UK who have additional needs, providing them with extra support and understanding, especially when feeling big emotions. She now is starting a business to help people find joy in their own lives and processing those emotions. This was a really sweet conversation, and she gave me a lot to think about in our own family dynamics and how we process emotions. So here's my conversation with Melissa. Welcome. We are with Melissa today. So Melissa, introduce yourself to us.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm a behavior analyst. I'm an American living in the UK with my British husband and daughter.
So you mentioned you're a behavioralist. What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm a behavior analyst, and I've spent most of my career helping kids and families and individuals lead a better, happier, more joyful life through making change in behavior around, whatever it is that they have goals in their life. So if they want to have better access to community outings, to better success in school, or whatever that is, we make a plan and make some changes. I've worked for companies most of my career, and around COVID, set out on my own. And I am now self-employed and have done some parent coaching. And I've spent the last year teaching kind of a combo of emotional regulation and journaling combined with creativity and watercolor painting and teaching classes to help create more joy.
Yeah, that's cool. So you talked about you've worked with families and children to try and help them kind of engage with the world. Is that specifically just neurodiverse families and children, or have you worked with all types of families?
All types of families in the States. And it was a lot of families that were impacted with autism, but it was also other developmental delays or brain injuries.
And how does neurodiversity impact your life?
I was recently diagnosed as autistic in June, just before I turned 50, realizing that I am autistic, and looking back over my life, all that new rounds has been eye-opening.
And what kind of led you to seek out a diagnosis for autism?
Funny enough, so for my business, I'm on Instagram. I do most of my social media on Instagram and follow a number of content creators. And I had probably started with 2 or 3 different ones that would come up with different, like, maybe I'm autistic or they are late diagnosed autistics, and talking about their experience and, some of the characteristics that they have, and a lot of it resonated with me. One of them one day put up, hey, someone had a comment about go to Embrace Autism and take the RADS-R. So I went out and did it, and I was like, no way. I know that can't be possible. So I took it again. Like, maybe I was just overthinking the questions. I probably took the test a dozen times, but it was all in the definitely look at, maybe you're autistic kind of levels. And then, of course, I did the same with the camouflaging one and whatever else I could find. And so kind of as that journey unfolded, it was the algorithm knew before I did. So it started sending me even more late diagnosed content creators talking about being a woman who is educated and quote unquote successful. I don't know what that really means, but I've had a held down job just fine. I have a family and I have a life. And I've always just kind of made those accommodations for myself just because that's, how I've masked and, all those masking. So I've learned a lot about the masking and the camouflaging and burnout and all of that. A lot of it through Instagram, funny enough. And then podcast, because there it would just lead into a podcast.
Yeah. So you mentioned masking, camouflage, and burnout. What are those three things, but how do they work in your life?
Yeah. So masking and camouflaging, basically covering up the symptoms of autism, right? One of those characteristic things constantly when we are talking and interacting with people, being aware of, have I looked long enough? Do I look away? Was it too intense? So just constantly trying to make sure that you're using socially appropriate eye contact, right? That's kind of a really basic one. Having a checklist in your head of, okay, so I'm going to meet this acquaintance I have. I should ask them about their last vacation. We should talk about the weather. You have this checklist in your head. Apparently neurotypicals don't really do that. So those are like masking things.
What about burnout? What does that mean and look like to you?
So autistics are constantly taking in a lot more of the environment than our neurotypical friends. And this can create an overload for our bodies and our brains and just our whole nervous system. Over time, trying to manage all of the sensory sensitivities that we may have, plus the social norms that we're trying to move with and be with and mask and camouflage into. And then just the regular demands from society. You go to work, you pay your bills, you feed your children and all of that can be quite overwhelming, and it can lead to burnout, which is just this whole total state of exhaustion, not being able to keep up, not getting out, being able to get out of bed, feeling constantly worn out, constantly fried, unable to tolerate things that maybe you might have been able to tolerate at other times, noise or social situations, that kind of thing, and decisions, not being able to make a decision. Burnout is something that I think I've been in for the last 2 years since my mom died.
I feel like it's a bit of a journey. So kind of what has the last 2 years of a journey been like for you? I know some of that is, obviously most of that is pre-diagnosis.
It's definitely led up to the diagnosis, and the diagnosis has kind of been the relief for sure. So the story kind of starts back with COVID, and through a number of events, we ended up moving from Texas to England during COVID times. And at the time, I was working as an independent contractor with an autism clinic and was working towards just becoming independent and doing parent coaching and doing online supported behavioral supports, and had just started getting that going and growing. And my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And from her diagnosis date to the day she passed away, it was 9 weeks. And I spent most of that in Texas with her. I'm really grateful for that. But when we came back, I just was exhausted. And obviously there was grief. There was a bit of depression. Having learned more about autism burnout, I think, I was just in a full state of overload. I was learning to function in a world where my mom did not exist anymore, in a country that I was not, I didn't grow up in, and things were different. And it was just a hard adjustment. During this time, I shut down my business, and I spent a long time trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. I was very indecisive. I was very mean to myself. I thought I was being lazy and that I was not a good person because I was not working hard. I ended up taking a watercolor class where the instructor drew courage cards for everybody that wanted one at the end of the class. This courage card will give me the motivation to really just get to work, get this business going, and, basically a kick at the butt. And the card she drew for me was, be kind to yourself. And I was mad, right? Be kind to yourself. That's not going to make me want to work. I was really mad about that stupid card, but I sat with it for weeks and realized how harsh my internal dialogue was, and that I was not moving myself with any compassion. I was not recognizing all I had done and all I had accomplished in that time.
Yeah.
And so it's been slow, but I've been starting the business again, focusing on helping others create more joy in their lives while I'm working on creating more joy in my life. I'm currently on a little sabbatical again as I try to figure out how to create joy in my life as a neurodivergent and autistic person.
What has that done for you?
Oh, it's grown compassion for myself, a lot of permission to be who I am, right? Obviously, this is a podcast, so people can't see us, but if you were here, you would see that I rarely look at the camera at Greer. I'm looking at the trees over the computer. I'm not making eye contact. I used to make myself make eye contact, right? Mm-hmm. I used to have a little post-it that said, look here at the camera. I don't do that anymore. I recognize that I need to fiddle with my fingers. So I have little twist ties that I constantly fidget with. And now I keep them in my purse so I can have them when I go out. I've been playing around with looped earplugs and noise-canceling headphones and AirPods to see kind of what I like best. Well, I don't think I'm necessarily kind of to the realm of people that have ARFID, which are extremely restrictive food sensitivities. I do have restricted kind of food needs, including some textures of foods, in particular like mushy vegetables are awful for me. I get them in my mouth. It's the weirdest thing. It's like I really literally cannot figure out how to chew and swallow them anymore. Other food, fine. It goes down just fine. The safe foods, the chips, the bread, that kind of stuff goes down just fine. But if something in my mouth just can't stand the texture of, I can't figure out how to swallow it. So I'm giving myself a lot of grace around that. Over the years, I've been able to figure out how to cook vegetables so that I could make a nice healthy meal for my family at dinner that included vegetables. But as far as being able to sit down and eat a salad, I used to think that to be a good person, you would have to sit down and eat a giant bowl of salad, like you're a goat or a horse or something. But it seemed to me that the good people would do that. They would sit down and eat a salad, and they would just be happy eating this salad and be like, this is great salad. And I could just never do that. The healthy foods that I want to achieve my health and nutrition goals, I'm making smoothies with those and giving myself permission to not think of the smoothie as cheating to get vegetables in. It's not cheating. I'm getting the food in that my body needs in a way that I can tolerate.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Yeah, that's a really good thought for anyone of like, just because you're not eating the salad doesn't mean you're not getting the food your body needs. And it looks different for everyone. And that's not just with food thing, that's rest or, someone else might need something else. It's okay to be different, and it's okay it doesn't look the same.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a big thing. It's okay to be different. It's okay for me to be me with my unique needs. And it's okay for me to seek out those accommodations, right? So seek out opportunities for one-to-one or, maybe very small group gatherings as opposed to large group gatherings. If the large group gathering is what I want to do, to understand that I can do things like bring my fidget. I can bring my earplugs. I can take 5 minutes to go outside. You know, I'm learning how to accommodate my sensory needs and to realize that I'm not being rude or antisocial or even just being an introvert, that my body has specific neurological needs for certain stimulation.
Yeah. What is something, I know you've said for years you've been kind of making accommodations for yourself, but in the last 2 months, what is one thing that has really stood out to you that you just feel has really benefited you?
Recognizing my sensory needs and using my noise canceling headphones when I need space, even though everybody's at home, right? And recognizing that I've always had, or not always, but throughout life, have had a swing, and I love to swing. So nothing is more soothing to me, and I'm putting my noise canceling headphones on. Sometimes I have a podcast, sometimes I have music playing, sometimes I just have nothing, and going and sitting outside in the swing and swinging. I feel my cup filling up almost literally. So being able to identify the actual stems that I need that lifts my nervous system out.
Yeah.
That's it.
What is something that you maybe advise or encourage someone who has stumbled across things on Instagram or other social media or this podcast or other podcasts that they're kind of like, oh, this sounds like me? What would you say they should do?
Go to the Embrace Autism website and take the RADS test. Well validated and has a number of points in it that most highly masking, low needs type of autistic would not think of as an autistic trait. And just kind of spend some time reflecting on what things make your body feel better and what things make your body feel drained, and bringing that, awareness to both of those can be super helpful. We're not going to be able to eliminate the things that drain us, but if we can balance it with the things that fill us, I think the quality of life definitely improves.
What is something that you found that is unique that neurodiversity brings to the table?
For me, being autistic, I'm deeply feeling, and I think that is probably one of my favorite things. What an amazing thing to feel like grief, right? Because just this profound loss in your life. So what an amazing thing to have lost something that was that great to you, right?
My son feels deeply. We've always said he feels joy and sadness and all the emotions in between deeply. I mean, we had a friend stay the night with us and she left. She was with us less than 24 hours. He has met her before, saw him for maybe 4 hours in that 24-hour period. And when she left, he was in tears for the whole day and just was like so sad that she left.
And how precious that he had that to love that time that much.
Yeah. Question that I have is, as a mama who is supporting a child who feels deeply, what could I do to help him help him kind of as he feels all the feelings deeply?
I encourage him to feel those feelings. Yeah, this is sadness. Yeah, you had so much fun and now she's gone and this is sadness. And sit with that feeling. It's okay to have those feelings. My daughter also feels quite deeply.
Yeah.
Sometimes when she's had really big feelings, we even talk about where they are in her body. Where can she feel that feeling? If she were to pull that feeling out and look at it, what does that feeling look like? So we almost make it into an object. And, when we're feeling that feeling, we come to this point at the end where we're like, okay, now what do you want that feeling to do? Do you want it to come with you? Do you want to hold it? You need to move on to the next feeling. And by doing that, and almost treating these feelings almost like they're pets in her control, she's kind of learned over time to gain some control.
Yeah. Making it into a thing, if that may, yeah. And like you say, where is it in your body? What does it look like? Because he's learning that. Like he, very much can't always just say what he's feeling, but he can kind of describe it or and so having kind of even more language to describe, I think would be helpful, I think. So yeah, thank you. We have, I don't know if you've come across this, but in the UK, there's the naughty step where people go for timeout. We have the feeling step. So we kind of know, like we often will go, that's where we'll sit and talk about our feelings for a little bit, because that's kind of what he needs. And so that's, some really good language to add to that. So thank you. You've worked with families and children, and now you have an official diagnosis. It's not like you've all of a sudden become autistic, but how can people support families and individuals who are either autistic or neurodiverse?
I think building an awareness that everyone is different and we're all here, working together to live this life. I think it's really important to recognize a neurodivergent person, maybe they're ADHD and they're constantly late, that it's not a personal thing. They just struggle and not executive functioning to get places all the time. For someone who is autistic, they're not making eye contact. Maybe they don't respond quickly, or they respond very bluntly. They're not being rude. They're answering your question that they need more space. It's not a personal thing. Not taking other people's efforts of controlling their emotional and body regulation as a personal affront.
How do you hope the world will change around this topic of neurodiversity?
I love social media for the fact that it is getting this information out there. I know that there's talk like, oh, everyone's autistic now, or everyone's ADHD now, and it's just a fad and it's overdiagnosed, but it's not. The people that are relating to this, it's probably because they're undiagnosed autistic or ADHD or, whatever other neurodivergent, whatever it is.
How do you hope the world will change around this topic of neurodiversity?
I know the world is always going to be typically dominated, and there are a lot of ways that we're going to have to fit into the neurotypical world. But the neurotypical world can bring awareness and acceptance and compassion for the differences that neurodivergent people have.
Yeah, that's, I think, as I've learned a lot through these conversations, is that line of wanting, especially for my son, thinking about wanting him to be him, but not, the idea of like, I don't want him to have to feel like he has to mask all the time or do these things. But at the same time, knowing that this is the world, and as much as I wish I could change the world for him, I can't. And so I really appreciate you saying how sometimes you're going to have to fit in, but also bringing awareness can change and bring change. And so
I think being a neurodivergent child myself at one point, and looking back and seeing that my mother was likely autistic, I learned a lot of my masking from her. There wasn't this acceptance of the big feelings, of the sensory needs. It was, here's how you cover that up. You want to be around people, then you stop whining. You don't feel big. You look people in the eye, right? All these rules for behaving is what she passed on to me. So I love that for your son, that you're letting him learn to be who he is.
Right. So you mentioned previously that you run some courses online about kind of watercoloring, drawing. How can that help someone who is neurodiverse and who isn't? Why have you jumped into that space?
I've always been deeply creative through just creating anything. I crochet, I paint, I've used watercolor paints and acrylic paints, and that outlet for me is very cathartic. I love what I'm doing with this is because it's taking those emotions that you feel and kind of journaling it out. I never could really get into journaling, just flat out writing. I write in this process, but it's not a whole lot. But the journaling process, using the watercolors in this like doodling, journaling, the colors flow, it's mindful, it's meditative. And as you're doing your doodle, you're thinking about your topic. Maybe you're doodling about the emotion that you're feeling, right? And so we're thinking, as you're putting a little paint and the water down on the paper, going through what it is that you're feeling, what do you want to learn out of that? What do you want this doodle to teach you about? Sometimes I work off of prompts. sometimes it's just doing what I'm feeling in the moment.
Yeah. I like the idea that it's not just writing. You're not just journaling to write, which for some people is exactly what they need.
But I just love the journaling and the watercolor. There's a perfectionist side to me, and everything needs to be just right and perfect. And watercolor does not go just right and perfect. And so it helps kind of lets me let go. The watercolor the paints are going to do what they're going to do on the page. And there's a lot of freedom in that.
What would be one thing that you would want to kind of share, particularly with people who are maybe like late diagnosis?
Take some time. Because I think there's a lot to be gained out of recognizing and holding your autistic self with compassion.
What would be one thing that you would want to say to parents who are raising autistic children, either young or adult?
I would say, number one, spend some time thinking about yourself, because it's very genetic. Like a lot of people that are getting late diagnosed, a lot of times their experience has been because their child has been diagnosed. So I think it may be helpful for them to realize, maybe they also are struggling with autism or ADHD or just other night traits, because I think by doing so, you're going to see your child in a new light. I think you're going to be able to see where they're coming from and where their struggles are, and also help them honor themselves while fitting into the neurotypical world.
What is something you want the world to know about neurodiversity and neurodiverse people?
We're way more prevalent than you even realize.
I would agree that you guys are awesome. I've started to use the language in our house of neurodiversity, particularly autism and ADHD, because that's what's in our house as a superpower. It's not a disadvantage. It's a superpower that I don't have, but my son and my husband do. And so we talk about kind of shaping that, and how, especially my son who loves superheroes, kind of you have to shape it and train it. It takes time. And so is there anything else you want to share with us or that's come to mind as we've talked?
I think everyone deserves joy, and it's a right. Joy is a right. It's not a privilege. And we can find joy through a lot of different ways, and learning to look at ourselves with compassion and acceptance is that path there. So, learning more about yourselves if you're neurodivergent, learning more about divergence if you are supporting family members, that's a good place to start.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a privilege to speak with you and to hear your story.
Oh, I've really enjoyed it.
An idea to finish on your own. Time perception. Perceiving the passing of time. Sometimes called time blindness. Some neurodivergent people may struggle to estimate how long a task may take. It may also mean that you're often late to things, or perhaps really early for something in order to compensate. Something to ponder on. How do you perceive the passing of time? Make sure to hit that follow button in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. Once you hit follow, they will be delivered straight to your podcast feed. See you next week.